All right, what's up guys, Tim Queen here, and today we're going to talk about lighting outdoors. Now when you start your own YouTube channel, you might think about different environments where you can film. Like for example, you might film at your home, in your office space. If you have a co-working space, you might get a conference room, you might rent a hotel room. But when this is not an option, sometimes when you're traveling, you might not have the right environment, there might not be enough light, or it might just be that your living room is not tidy enough to film. A great place to start your YouTube journey is to go outdoors. Outdoors has many advantages. One is, for example, you're getting almost always perfect light. Sunlight has the right color temperature and just everything looks crispy, clear, and the colors look right in most circumstances. But it also has a couple of downsides which we have to talk about. Now, when I'm creating outdoor videos, I'm looking at three different types of weather. One is really sunny, that's bad. One is cloudy, what we just have now, that's really good usually. And then we have bad weather. And we're going to talk about all three of them and what you can do in each situation, how to get the most out of your light. So when we have really bright sunshine, it has a lot of disadvantages. For once, depending on your camera, if you're using a smartphone, your smartphone can easily overheat, especially if you put it into bright sunlight. You have to think about this. Smartphone is very super compact. There is no space for any ventilation or any huge heat sinks. So the phone is really quickly heating up, especially if you get in direct sunlight, which can cause a couple of things. For once, your phone might turn off at some time when it's getting too hot. But then another one, which is way more dangerous, is when your footage gets corrupted because the CPU overheats, and then you might have recorded an entire video file, but it's completely useless. That happened to me once when I was using the phone actually indoors, and I was charging it while recording 4K, full resolution, highest bitrate, and then afterwards the entire footage had no soundtrack anymore and the footage was basically garbage. What you can do is, you have bright sunlight, you can look for some shady places, like find some trees or find something like natural shading. You might find something like a bus stop which has a ceiling on top. Anything that has a shade will make it better for your camera. It will not overheat. And this brings us to our next problem, which direct sunlight is really dangerous for us. It creates a lot of harsh shadows, which are really difficult for cameras to process. Now, what you want to do is you generally want to have a flattering light. Flattering light is generally one which is very soft. And when we're talking about soft, we're talking about diffuse light. Think about this like this. You have like some laser coming in a very straight line, bouncing back to your camera. This will get very harsh shadows. But imagine like this, you are using this laser and you're diffusing it into 1 billion angles, and it's like spreading out. It's bouncing off from all of your environment onto you. It's bouncing back in all kinds of directions. All of this light is hitting your sensor. This way you have very even lighting and everything becomes soft and smooth. Now this is exactly what happens with the sunlight. In our case, the sun is our laser. It shines straight down on us. When we have some clouds, the cloud diffuses the entire light and is basically bouncing off from everything else, hitting us, then going to the camera, so it always looks smooth. The third problem with sunlight is especially when you're having a DSLR camera, the camera might not be able to keep up with the intensity of the light. You might not think about this that much because your eyes are used to adapting to the environment, so your pupils getting smaller in order to keep more light out, so you can still see even in bright daylight, and it will open up like at night when there is not a lot of light open. But the camera can only do that to a certain degree. For once, the sensor is not as good as our internal sensor in the back of our eyes, but it's also like limited in technical capacities. Now what happens is the lens will try, if you set it on auto mode, to do a couple of things. For once, it will reduce the amount of light that can come in. So it will close the iris or your aperture, so less light can hit the sensor. Then it will reduce the time it takes for each picture to take. For example, each frame might, in relatively neutral light, might take 1/200th of a second, but in really bright daylight, it might go down to 1/8000th or 1/20,000th of a second, depending on what your camera can do. And that can create a lot of choppy footage, especially if there's a lot of movement going on behind your camera. The third thing the camera will try to do is will reduce the sensitivity of the sensor. But usually when we're looking at daylight, you cannot go much further than ISO 100. So that's kind of like the limit. Because of all of this, you take away a lot of the advantages that a DSLR is bringing. Now, what you can do is you can buy an ND filter, which is basically just like sunglasses for your DSLR camera. And then you can adjust the amount of light that can come through the lens. There have been clouds all day long, and then I'm adjusting my ND filter for exactly that amount of light. And then the sun is like the clouds moving away, and suddenly I'm in bright daylight. Now I have to go back and adjust my ND filter again to let in less light, which can be really difficult if you are just by yourself. You don't have someone like monitoring the amount of light coming on all day long. Really bright sunlight is really challenging, and the only real environment where you can like get this done is getting a shady place, somewhere like semi-outdoors, something like with a rain covering on top or some trees on top. That's really the only place how you can do that. You can also just get out when the sun is less bright. That means morning and evening, generally speaking. Even if you have bright sunlight, because of the angle of the sun, you still get a lot of diffusion through the morning angle, and you also get less intensity. So you overall getting better quality. But if you're like out at noon, just like me just now, it's really, really challenging. And there is much better conditions that you can work with. Now this brings us to point number 2 for ideal weather conditions, which is cloudy. Cloudy generally is really good diffuser. It's just taking away all the harshness of the light. You don't get like harsh shadows, like for example here under my eyes right now. Clouds will take care of this. They will just spread the light everywhere. Some of the light will, for example, bounce to the ground and then hit me from below. So this shadow will be disappearing because of the diffusion of the clouds. But for filming, this is a really ideal situation. So you don't really have to be that restricted. When it's cloudy, you can go anywhere. You can go into the open. You can still go under your trees or anywhere on your balcony if you want to. But with clouds, you really have the ability to move around much more freely and much more easily without having to consider all the different aspects of depth of field of your camera that you have to adjust this. You don't have to put on any ND filter. It's much more convenient. And the third weather condition, which is bad weather, and I'm grouping this together because there's all kinds of conditions that might make it really difficult for you to get your image properly taken. This can be, for one, when it's really, really windy and stormy. So this is one of the things I'm always checking my weather app. Like I'm looking like, what is the wind speed for today? If it's more than 10 kilometers per hour, I will probably not go outside for filming because that can make it really challenging. It creates a lot of background noise, even with my good microphone. Every time there is wind, it creates a lot of noise, which makes it difficult for other people to understand my voice. So I have to do a lot of post-processing, which takes away some of the details from my voice. So it's not really ideal. So it's really stormy, really difficult for the sound, but also for your camera. Storm can easily knock over your tripod, which when you have a really expensive smartphone or DSLR camera on top of it, can be really challenging. Another thing that can happen, even if your tripod doesn't get knocked over, you might get a problem with image stabilization. Because every time like the camera is getting hit by wind, the sensor will vibrate, which creates little micro vibrations, which you can see, which can be really annoying for people who are watching your video. Rain is another condition. It can damage your camera or your smartphone if your model isn't good enough. It can also cause raindrops on your lens. Rain is generally bad. Same thing for snow. Snow has an additional disadvantage, which can cause a lot of harsh reflection because white is such a good reflector. So if you have harsh sunlight, the sunlight bouncing off is basically like a mirror. It can also cause the same effects for the camera in winter time, even with sometimes with less light than in summertime, because you have all of those reflections bouncing onto your camera. So it's something to really keep in mind when you're going out for filming. Now let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite environment for filming when you're going outdoors? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to get more videos about how to grow a YouTube channel successfully, how to monetize it with different methods, even if you don't have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time yet, make sure that you smash the subscribe button, and I see you in the next one. Bye.